Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Interesting day one of the GOP House Clown Show. They got the rules passed through. Was kind of held out a little bit of hope that maybe there'd be a handful of Republicans who are going, I don't know, bad idea, giving the most radical of the bunch the keys to the car. I don't know. But hey, it went through. We now have the weakest speaker. Going to be fun to see how they bang him around. But the Republicans showed their hand right from the start. Remember the 4 years under the former president, under 45? What was the only thing they got done? Yeah, that tax bill. Because again, the only thing that Republicans truly care about, the tax fetish. That's all they care about. It's all that's in the ears. It's all that's, because understand, when a Republican allows the billionaire to cheat on their taxes, they get another donation. You thought I was going to go with their wings to get into heaven, did you? No, they get a tax. They get a donation, and that's what they're doing as we speak. The Republicans are holding their little clown show under the guise of the. You got to love the names. They are so much better at naming things than the Democrats. So much better. The Family and Small Business Protection Act. Because they're going to protect families and small businesses from the evil IRS. Because if you listen to the spiels that they gave today on the House floor, that somehow Biden was able to hire 87,000 agents, yesterday, and they're out there marauding, probably teaming up with MS-13, maybe even hired. I didn't hear a Republican say it, but I wouldn't be surprised that they believed it, that they hired MS-13 to come and be IRS agents. I'm sure that somewhere that will come up. But if you listen to the rhetoric, they hired 87,000 agents and they're coming for your children. Because according to them, they're going to attack the poor. Now, what's interesting is they're not absolutely wrong in looking at the data from the former guy and what happened. When the former guy went and cut the number of IRS agents down to the lowest number per return, probably since the agency began, where did they go? They went after the low-hanging fruit. They went after the poor people who were claiming the earned income tax credits and that kind of stuff. Because, hey, we gotta get something. We got to go through and we got to turn things. They stopped going after rich people. They stopped going after the really complicated returns, which is why the Biden administration and Democrats have said, hey, we need to hire more qualified IRS agents to go and audit these really complicated returns. We need to get people who understand the code and understand this isn't going to be easy. There's no way they're going to find 87,000 IRS people tomorrow. This is a build for the future. This is over the next decade. But if you listen to the sky is falling people, that he's already hired them, and that they're marching for the children. They're coming for your pennies and the sofa cushions. But the Family and Small Business Protection Act, more like the Tax Cheat Protection Act. Now remember, the former guy stood on a stage and said that, he didn't pay taxes because he's smart. And a bunch of his minions went, hey, he's smart, while they paid their taxes. And now we know, because we've seen some of Trump's returns, he didn't pay anything. He is smart. He got you. He got me. He got us to pay his taxes. And he got a percentage of the population to applaud him and vote for him. And to vote for people who gave him even more tax breaks. Because that's all the Republicans accomplished in the 4 years under the former guy. So it's interesting to me. Now, one of the things that came up during the House floor discussions was, under the Reagan administration, and one of the things that Reagan, advocated for was a ratio of one IRS agent for every 2,000 returns. We're nowhere near that today. It's, like I said, at one of the lowest levels ever. And it's one of these moments where you go, if you're overworked, underpaid, and understaffed, what ends up happening? You then go after the easy stuff. And the wealthy are very happy with that. The wealthy are thrilled by the fact that nobody's coming for them. And when they do, they don't have the resources to go very long. The audits are generally light because, well, they don't want to get tied up in long legal battles and long court battles because the wealthy, they have the resources to fight this stuff out. Now, I find it interesting that the party who talks about debt and deficits, the party who talks about spending money wisely, on their first day, going to hike the deficit by some $114 billion because the revenue that was going to be created per year out of auditing the very wealthy who pay zero, like Donald Trump, who pays zero, that was going to go into the coffers. Now, what you're going to have is you're going to have people going, but Rick, you know, they spend that money in other places. Yeah, the Caymans. And what you're seeing is you're seeing the wealthy getting much cozier with you know, offshore tax havens, getting much cozier in places like the Cayman Islands or Ireland or places where, you know, well, you can hide a little money. Find it interesting. But the Republicans are there to protect those folks. And I want to know your thoughts. Are you okay with this? Now, look, I don't want, you know, working class people to be audited. I don't want people making $25,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year to be audited every year. And they're not going to be. This is a scare tactic. The Biden administration has said, as a percentage, things are not going to increase above where they are from people making less than $400,000 a year. We should want an enforcement arm to make sure that the taxes that we pay are paid by everyone. Because at the end of the day, what's happened over the last, 40, 50 years is the tax burden has shifted from the very wealthy to the very poor and to the working class. And we've created massive debt. I'm not someone who believes in debt. It's one of these things, it's just incredible to me that we've been allowed to grow this debt as large as it is when we have such an enormous billionaire class. Because we're told that if we give them all this money, they're going to use it wisely. If we give corporate America all this money, they're going to use it wisely. And what we find out what they do with it is they buy their stocks back. Huge, I think it was like $1.3 trillion last year in stock buybacks. That's $1.3 trillion in money that was supposed to be used for a productive use. You know, new equipment, higher salaries for workers, lower prices, whatever it was supposed to go to something other than lining the pockets of the very wealthy and the shareholders. But that's all it's doing. It's corporate America saying we have no productive use for this money other than we're going to hoard it. And no one in government is moving to stop that, especially not the Republicans. If you saw it today, nope. Now, fortunately, this isn't going to go anywhere. It's going to die in the Senate. But it does speak to their priorities. And it is another attack on working people. And what's amazing and what Republicans have done masterfully is they've gotten working people making $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year to go, you know what, I'm against taxes. Taxes are bad. And every time they hear the word taxes, they foam at the mouth like a Pavlovian dog and think that, what their tax liability is and what, Elon Musk's should be are the same, and they're not. There was a point in this country, when we paid for roads and bridges, we paid for education, we paid for health care, we had investments in the future, and we didn't have massive debt and deficits. But we also didn't have gazillionaires. And we had a tax code that had a top marginal tax rate of 92%. And you know what those people at the top did? They didn't give that money to the government. They paid higher wages to their workers. They invested in healthcare facilities and educational facilities and libraries. They invested it in communities. They didn't hoard it. And this comes back to the question, what kind of an economy do we want? What kind of an economy do working people need? It's my thought. Want to hear yours. 1-866-416-RICK. 1-866-416-7425. Want to hear your thoughts. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, Supreme Court case coming up on Tuesday. Could have massive, painful ramifications. Right back. Stick around. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So more than 7,000 nurses went on strike today in New York City. Members of the New York State Nurses Association affiliated with National Nurses United, fighting for a fair contract and to improve patient care. Something we should be standing behind and standing with. And I want to throw a shout out to them that we stand in support with them. Let's quick go to the phone lines. Got Alice on line 1. Alice, how are we doing today?
We're doing okay. How about yourself?
I am doing well. What's on your mind?
Well, I just think it is totally amazing how they have their base brainwashed, thinking that taxes are bad because, of course, they all believe that at some point they're going to be billionaires themselves.
Yeah. No, I see it. Here's the thing. And, I have a friend whose parents were very wealthy, and back during World War II, they were happy to pay the 92% tax rate because it was an investment in the country. We're not that country anymore.
No, we're not. No, we're not. And I just had an experience a few days ago with one of these dingalings where they were having a hysterical fit, and I said, well, congratulations. And they were like, what? I said, you make over $400,000. No, I don't. I said, then shut up, because it doesn't apply to you. So
it's the same, but it's the same thing with the death tax, the inheritance tax. I had people who were saying the same thing. I don't want to pay taxes when I die. You worth $11 million somewhere? You work in a minimum wage job, you got $11 million I don't know about?
Yeah.
Yeah, well.
I don't know. I have never in my life seen such an ignorant bunch of people. And I mean literally ignorant, because they have no clue about anything and how it applies to them.
Yeah. Fun times. That's why we need to get out there and educate them, Alice. Appreciate the thoughts.
Bye.
Thanks so much. But here's the thing. And look, the reality is this is where working people need to come back together. The right has done such a masterful job of misinformation and disinformation and feeding. You're gonna pay taxes when you die, and you go, I hope so, because that would mean I'd have $11 million. That means I would have a lot of money. I don't. And what's amazing to me is we don't see the real attacks on us every day. Right now, there's a Supreme Court case that is going to be heard on Tuesday. We talked about it last week a little bit. It is the Glacier Northwest Incorporated versus International Brotherhood of Teamsters Local Union 174. We talked about it last week. It was, you had like 46 cement truck workers. They worked for this cement company who came to work. The union and the company were negotiating. The negotiations broke down in the morning. The union said, hey, we're going on strike. The workers came in, said, hey, we're done. We're going out on the picket line. The trucks are running. They're out on the line. There's cement in it. You better deal with it. The company had no contingency plans, had no idea what to do. And as I said before, they probably didn't even know how to operate the trucks. So they were left in a lurch. Now, this is their problem. This is what happens when you don't negotiate in good faith. This is what happens when these kind of talks break down. And this is how this has gone for years. So what this company has done is they sued. They said, wow, we had to waste all that concrete and we had to, dispose of it. And we're going to sue the union for the cost of this concrete. Now that's all new. The court in Washington State threw it out, saying, this isn't the purview of the law. This is part of what labor law is. There's nothing here for you. There's no way for you to win this. But they're taking it to the Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court that out of whole cloth came up with the Janus decision. The Supreme Court that you've got Samuel Alito, who has openly stated his disdain for organized labor and organized workers. A Supreme Court that is basically in the pocket of the Chamber of Commerce. When the Chamber of Commerce puts a brief in on a case, an amicus brief, I think the study said like almost 3/4 of the time the court sides with the Chamber of Commerce. That's how in the pocket the Roberts Court is in corporate America. Working people get just pummeled at the court. And you go, well, what's the big deal? It's just a little bit of cement. Understand, this is opening the door. If the Roberts Court does what I think they're going to do, they're going to make new law. They are going to, from the high bench, they are going to overturn decades of decided law. They're going to overturn the written law, and they're going to make sure that corporate America can use the NLRB and use labor law and the courts to stop people from striking by saying, look, hey, we lost money. And first it's going to start like this. It's going to start with, hey, we lost cement. You walked out and the cement went bad. Hey, you're going to pay for this. And then it's going to get to, well, that cement could have been poured somewhere and we could have charged somebody. So we lost profits because of you. So we're going to sue for lost profits. They've already tried it in some places. And there will be a chilling effect across the entire movement. Now understand, right now you're starting to see an uptick in people using their right to strike, using their ability to strike. And understand, corporate America, not happy with that. None whatsoever. Now understand, the law right now, as it is, says, look, corporations can sue and recover damages if there's vandalism, if it's deliberate sabotage. There was none of that. But they're trying to expand it, trying to make it bigger. And understand, the Roberts, Alito, Gorsuch, Thomas Court would love nothing more than to put workers and their unions in their place. This is one of those things. Now, this could expand into farm workers, warehouse workers. Hey, it's Black Friday. We're going to lose profits. Hey, we've got to deliver that produce. If the produce goes bad, we're going to charge you for all of that. And then there's going to be tons of shenanigans played. And then you're going to know that they're going to continue to file frivolous lawsuits just to burn up dues dollars, just to keep the union spinning their wheels to ensure that they're not out there using their resources to organize new members or to represent their current members. This is bad stuff. But it's about putting workers and their unions back in their place. It's about silencing that voice, that one tool, that one tactic. The only tactic that workers have. The right to withhold their labor. And you go, well, how can they do that? How can they stop me from going on strike? They're going to sue you now. Look at in Illinois what they did to the teachers. If you quit your job as a teacher, they pull your license. They were pulling that for a while. There's going to be a point down the road, mark my word, if they get their way, if they are able to continue to use the Supreme Court to silence the voice of workers, to silence the unity of workers, the ability for us working people to use the only tool we have, the only power, and that's the power to withhold your labor. If they take that away, what's left? How do you then fight for better wages, hours, conditions? How do you make lives better? Because we've been going through 50 years of attacks, 50 years of suppressing wages, of shifting benefits from the employer onto the employee, from stealing pension benefits. We've been seeing 50 years of massive redistribution of wealth and working people getting the short end of the stick at every turn. And yet here it is. The next step in using the law against working people. The next step in using the Supreme Court against workers. Now I have people go, but and again, I come back to this political divide. This is a Republican issue. Republicans hate working people. It's glaringly apparent. Look at the policies they push, look at the Supreme Court justices they appoint, and look at the decisions they move on. It's always anti-worker. It's always on the side of money, on the side of power, on the side of corporations, on the side of the elite. Yet their rhetoric is, they care. If you listen to them today on the House floor, oh boy, they were just dripping with how much they care about families and small businesses. And the reality is they could give a tinker's damn. You know who they care about? They care about the rich and powerful. They care about the billionaires. They care about big corporations, the ones who line their campaign coffers. This will be, if it goes the wrong way. And I got to tell you, I have no faith in the Supreme Court to leave the law alone. Remember John Roberts, Mr. Balls and Strikes? Believes in stare decisis, believes in decided law, and yet this court has been overturning precedent for years. Basically just making stuff up because they can. The question is, what are we going to do about it? How are we going to respond? Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, Randy Corrigan's going to be here from Teamsters Local 1932 to share some thoughts on how this will affect his members and a victory at Amazon, and maybe how this could have undone that. Stick around. You're not going to want to miss it. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1922. That was the day Chicago building trades began to split over the much-hated Landis Award. The building trades had always enjoyed strong solidarity, built through years of sympathy strike action. By 1921, they were involved in a bitter dispute with the city's employers, who had been on the open shop offensive since the end of World War I. Contractors attempted to impose deep wage cuts and instituted a lockout when the building trades refused to go along. Judge Kennesaw Landis, who sent close to 100 IWW members to prison during World War I, arbitrated the dispute and issued his award that fall. Considered a major blow to the building trades, his award outlined 8 points on behalf of the employers. It imposed deep wage cuts of anywhere from 15 to 40%, practically abolished the right to strike, and undermined years of established work rules. As the Chicago Federation of Labor and Building Trades Council geared up for the fight, the employers created their own Citizens Committee to enforce the award. The Chicago Federation of Labor noted that of the committee's 176 members, only 54 were based in the city, and of those, only one had any connection with the industry. And on this day, the Chicago Building Trades Council called for a strike. Some unions refused to abide by the call. The building trades split, with the carpenters and painters among those in favor of striking, versus the bricklayers, electrician, and ironworkers voting to honor the award. A reported 60,000 building tradesmen walked off the job anyway, but the strike soon failed. The trades continued to erode the award's strength, and by 1926, many local agreements simply superseded its enforcement. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Question: how many legs does a dog have if you count the tail as a leg? Answer: 4. Calling the tail a leg doesn't make it one. Likewise, calling a small group of partisan lawyers a Supreme Court doesn't make it one. There's nothing supreme about the six-pack of far-right-wing political activists who are presently soiling our people's ideals of justice by proclaiming their own anti-democratic biases to be the law of the land. On issues of economic fairness, women's rights, racial justice, corporate supremacy, environmental protection, theocratic rule, and other fundamentals, these unelected black-robed extremists are imposing an illegitimate elitist agenda on America that the people do not want and ultimately will not tolerate. Indeed, the imperiousness of the 6 ruling judges has already caused the court's public approval rating to plummet to a mere 38%. An historic low that ranks down there with Trump and threatens to go as low as Congress. This has led to a flurry of protests by the court itself, attesting to their honesty and political impartiality. The integrity of the judiciary is in my bones, pontificated Neil Gorsuch, who now stands accused of having lied to senators to win his lifetime appointment. "We're not a bunch of partisan hacks," wailed Amy Coney Barrett, a partisan extremist jammed into the court in a partisan ploy by Trump in the last few hours of his presidency. "Judges are not politicians," protested John Roberts, who became Chief Justice because he was a rabid political lawyer who pushed the Supreme Court in 2000 to reject the rights of voters and install George Bush as president. This is Jim Hightower saying, remember, in America, the people are supreme. We don't have to accept the rule by an illegitimate court. For reform, go to fixthecourt.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
You know, between the Federal Reserve raising interest rates to create more unemployment and the Supreme Court dreaming up new laws attacking workers, you got to wonder, where do we go? I mean, look, Tuesday when the Supreme Court hears this case, this Glaciers case, the chilling effect across organized labor will be painful. Because again, as I said, the only power workers have is that to withhold their labor, to cross their arms and march their feet. And once you penalize that, once you basically criminalize that, wow. Now I look what's going on out on the West Coast, and there was a great story on Friday that we didn't get to. Amazon was in the process of firing a young woman who was a union activist organizer, and the workers all came together, wore signs, wore buttons, and she got back to work. It shows that solidarity works. And you know what they did? They threatened to strike if they didn't replace it. This is the kind of stuff that scares the you-know-what out of corporate America. And here to share some thoughts on what it took and maybe share some of the details that I'm missing. I've asked my good friend Randy Corrigan to come talk with us. Randy is the president, or the secretary treasurer and principal officer at Teamsters Local 1932. Randy, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Rick. Appreciate it. Always make time for you guys.
So walk me through what happened with Sarah Fee and Amazon? Walk me through. Was she fired? Was she put on administrative leave? What's the story there?
She was put on administrative leave after a very minor conversation with a union avoidance individual, union buster, essentially, at the Amazon facility that she works at there in San Bernardino. And they put her on administrative leave pending, obviously discipline and termination. And this is the same group many may have read about that went on strike in October, walked off the job in August. I have had, direct action after direct action, withheld their labor in very strategic fashion to prove to Amazon that they're valuable and that their work is valuable in the area. And they obviously all rallied behind Sarah in that particular situation. And she was put back to work on Friday.
No, that is a huge victory and a sign of solidarity, and something that had to scare the you-know-what out of Amazon, and really, shocks across corporate America, because if working people can show that kind of solidarity and stand together, well, the pitchforks may come out at some point, and, well, the wealthy not thrilled about it, which is why, this Supreme Court case that's going to be heard on Tuesday is so important, because if this case goes the way I believe it will, one of the tools that would have been used to help get Sarah back to work would be off the table.
Yeah, it clearly shows that once again, corporate America is using the judicial system, the National Labor Relations Act, to try to obviously restrict workers' ability to use what power that they have. And it's just a reminder that we shouldn't be depending, we being workers and obviously advocates for working people, shouldn't be dependent upon that system, that we need to encourage more and more workers to do exactly what these workers did in San Bernardino, these Amazon workers did around Sarah, which is, if you do this, we will do that. And that is very clearly saying this direct action that we are going to engage in is going to, we're doing it as for solidarity and to send a message that an injury to one is an injury to all. And so I hear what you said. I slightly disagree in a sense that I don't think it's the end of the world, and here's why. I think it's terrible. I think it's disgusting. I think that they're going to go that way. I think that we have seen the Supreme Court. We've seen what the laws have done in the last 40 years. And I think it's a constant reminder to us that we have to literally get back to more direct action that actually created the law to begin with.
Right.
That, what created the Wagner Act was this sort of activity and this sort of action of workers engaging. And then finally, Commerce said, okay, we got to come up with a fair set of rules for workers. And I think that I agree with you. I think that the Supreme Court is going to work against us on this and make it punishable, something that was normally preempted by the National Labor Relations Act. Why would they even entertain this? This is something that the Supreme Court should just bounce and say, we're not going to hear it. It's preempted under the National Labor Relations Act. Of course, they're going to hear it because we know that that's what we're getting with the Supreme Court. But it's also a reminder that workers have to do more of what these workers did when they surrounded themselves around Sarah, and that is to take direct action. Will corporations fight back? Sure, they will. And so we're going to have to, do more and more of this. And workers are ready to do this. We're seeing this, in lots of places all over the country where workers are willing to take this sort of action.
No, I'm with you, and I'm curious where you disagree with me. But if this goes the way I think it is, and they use this as a tool to go after workers and their organizations, financially, to go after, first it's going to start with, we lost some cement or we lost some produce. And eventually, they're going to go after lost profits and future profits and all kinds of things, or just to get you guys spinning your wheels, spending money on legal fees and all of that. So I just see this as an attack tool to suppress strikes, but I'm curious where you disagree.
I agree that it's an attack tool as you described it, but where I disagree is I don't think it should scare labor, nor should I think that it should slow us down from encouraging workers to withhold their labor. I think that maybe do we have to be a little bit more guarded in how we're doing it, but we absolutely should accelerate the fact that we're doing it, and if the Supreme Court rules in which we think the way they are, that is a reason to accelerate these issues and to say, and to do and have more direct action and say, well, you're going to do this. Guess what we're going to do as a result of it? We're going to create more disruption as a result. We're going to withhold our labor more and more because you guys are just trying to tighten the belt on us legally. That's the part I disagree in.
No, I know how it should go, but my fear is it becomes a chilling effect because of now we're going to act defensively. We got to worry about, hey, can the coffers, can we afford it? Are we going to end up going broke? That's my concern, is that I know it will have a chilling effect.
Well, hey, you bring up a great point, and I think, as a principal officer myself, it's something that you've got to balance, right? How much the legal cost going to be? Well, there's a point where if we keep being scared in the labor movement into a corner on this stuff, then we're afraid to do anything. We've been paralyzed by a lot of this stuff in the last 50 years, and it's created a space of being inactive. And so, it's almost like, keep being paralyzed. Then there's going to be nothing left. Or let's get to work. Let's spark direct action. Let's move some workers into the street, and let's take control of whatever industry needs to be taken control of by doing it in the way that built the industry to begin with.
No, could this be a moment though? I know I say this every time there's another attack, another cut, another death of 1,000 paper cuts. That is this the one that makes people finally go, this is a bridge too far, and does what you're talking about, more direct action, more people waking up to the reality that, we've been getting screwed for 40 years.
I think sometimes you don't ever know what that breaking point is. If you go back in history and you see when general strikes happened, or, when moments in time were created, they were not predictable. And I don't think this one's predictable either. It's another layer that's getting stacked on the situation to what you just said. In other words, it's another thing that's happening where workers are going, how many times are you going to cut out my feet from underneath me? And it brings people closer to resolution on what they need to do, and to not depend on, let's say, the National Labor Relations Act or the Supreme Court to bail them out, or any system like that. What we know in this country that's worked for over 100 years is workers depending on one another, workers in solidarity, doing what they have to do. And when you don't break that down, you're typically going to win.
Yeah. Now, on the other side of this, I wanted to get your thoughts. Is there a possibility, if this goes the way that I think we both believe it will, that this would work to the advantage of workers, that they could sue corporations for damages? Look, you got fired illegally, you got fired unjustly, you got put out, for one reason or another. Could you sue them for punitive damages outside of lost wages? Because this is basically what this case is saying.
I would say absolutely. Remember, if you're going to live by the sword, you're going to die by the sword. And if you're going to take away the preemption on an issue, then the flip side of that preemption works on the side that you just pointed out. Absolutely, we need to press that issue, right? But not depend on it. What we need to depend on is that worker solidarity, and that, once again, direct action over and over again over the last 100 years is what has driven good policy. Not waiting on someone to create some good policy. It's really been some sort of direct action, then created a response from government or elected officials or commerce or whomever it was. And then they enacted a policy to deal with whatever that direct action was. And I think that it just puts us closer to that space. And clearly, I agree with you. I think we should immediately challenge it on the flip side. No different than challenging right to work, the way you can challenge right to work and allow a state to have card check recognition. And if you're going to allow this preemption to exist, and that's where the Supreme Court's got a slippery slope here. It's probably fair to say that they're going to have a narrow ruling in here, because the wider they rule in a negative space, the better our argument is to wipe away some preemptions we want wiped away.
Yeah, my fear in this, Randy, is, as we said a moment ago, or as I said a moment ago, the only true power a worker has is the right to fold their arms and march their feet, to withhold their labor. We've seen in Illinois, for instance, where teachers were threatened with having their license pulled if they dared quit a job. I fear we're going to head to a point to where leaving employment, stopping work, withholding your labor will become so costly that we end up getting into horrible conditions that people can't get out of, and under the guise of a legal structure. That's what's concerning to me.
I think that's a good fear, and I think that any confrontation or situation that we get into in the future, we should always balance that and respect that and understand that there is the possibility for the end result to be an employer taking the extreme position and you having to deal with that. But also we can't be driven into a situation where we decide to allow the fear of that to prevent us from making it happen. I do fear, though, that labor leaders, and I'll say it, labor leaders that are too restricted by the legal sort of menagerie of the system and kind of sometimes afraid of their own shadows, that fear will paralyze part of what we do. I think that, let's be real, Rick, that is there. There's a lot of elected individuals that sometimes, you're convinced not to do things because there's every reason why not to do it versus looking at the reasons to do it.
Yeah, good point.
And you and I have talked about this subject before many times in the past. And I think that this is one of those moments where, again, direct action, and it is an attack on direct action. So I guess we got to take it square on, right?
You're listening to the Rick Smith Show with Randy Corrigan. He's Teamsters Local 1932 Secretary, Treasurer, and Principal Officer. You can check out their website, teamsters1932.org. We'll get links out on social media. I got an email from Brian in Chicago listening on WCPT AM 820 who asks about the UPS, possibility of a UPS strike and what it would mean for workers there. If this were to go into effect. And, I've had this question come up a bunch of times about, if there is a strike, and I'm not advocating for one, we don't know what's going to happen yet. They're at the table, obviously. Nobody wants it to happen, but it's an arrow in the quiver. But I don't want this to be one of those things that would have a chilling effect. I'm curious if you have a thought.
I do. I think that, in some circles, it'll argue that it limits. In others, I think that it's going to be full steam ahead. And I think that we have to approach this, and specifically with UPS, there's obviously a lot of buildup around that contract right now. There's a lot of changes that have happened in that industry in the last decade. You work in that industry in the last 2 decades. It's shifted tremendously. The transportation industry, the goods movement system, LTL, package, freight, all of that stuff. And I think that the buildup around the awareness on this contract for July, the employer will try to use this as a tool, as a chilling effect with the membership. And hopefully what happens is the membership see right through that, recognize that you have the right to do that. I personally believe that this union will make very good decisions when it comes to that subject, and we will make sure that we move in the right direction. There's a lot of elected officials within the union itself that are connected clearly to something this large, with more than 300,000 of our members connected to it. And how do I think it's going to affect us? I think that we just have to deal with whatever that decision is. And when the decision comes down, we got to make sure we're as creative as possible to make sure that we have the right to withhold our labor when the time is right.
Yeah, ultimately, while we're talking about withholding your labor, that's a worker-centric position. I look at Amazon, who seems to be moving in a direction of everyone being their own boss and being a gig worker, being an independent contractor, which is another issue that I think we have to deal with. And it's something that I think, the right and there are people in our political system very happy to move in that direction. I'm curious the movement towards getting those people as employees and fighting back, especially when you're talking about UPS, because as Amazon is growing their delivery system, they're doing it with a gig model.
Yeah, and these corporations dumping their responsibilities, whether they be on independent contractors or contractors that are handling the delivery of product and or third-party operations, is proliferated massively in the last 3 decades. That expansion of the industry operating that way has led to higher injuries, It's led to higher turnover. It's led to a number of things, including higher profits for these companies in the industry, which ultimately is what everybody's looking at. And they're not taking value in the workforce itself.
Yep.
As a result, you have a frustrated workforce. That's why 70% of the population wants to be in a union today, as the polls clearly show, because employers have not taken care of their workforce, and they have devalued the importance of that job, and basically almost looked down upon individuals that are doing this hard work their entire career. And basically, you're not worth, you don't have the value to be able to retire in dignity, or have great health care, or be able to provide for your family, or just have a very simple middle class lifestyle. So
that's why I think the organizing going on around Amazon, the organizing going on around places like Starbucks, the UPS contract, I think, is so important. I think these things are so important that we've got to stay up on them and fight in a direction that makes lives better, and keep hammering that message. The one that I got as a young kid: union job, better life. It's that simple for me.
Yeah, and we need to get back to that. We need to make sure that our awareness, first of all, it's our responsibility as union members ourselves to be positive about our organization. And obviously the trajectory of life being a union member is completely different than being non-union. That responsibility falls on all of us. And we've failed the last couple generations, have not done a good enough job of making sure that the new generation coming in understands it at the right level. That, number two, making sure we're engaging with the community, making sure we're building the right partnerships, making sure that we're going to city council meetings and school board meetings, and we're building very robust relationships inside of our natural community that we live and work in, so that there's familiarity with the union and the environment in which it provides, versus it just being some obscure thing that corporate America talks about.
Yep. No, you're absolutely right, Randy. I appreciate the time, the thoughts. Good on you guys for getting out there organizing. Good on the people at Amazon for standing up and fighting for Sarah Fee. I look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Yeah, anytime. Thank you for having us on.
Good stuff. Randy Corrigan, Principal Officer, Secretary Treasurer there at Teamsters Local 1932. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You'll listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Do national security concerns outweigh the right of workers to form a union? That question was being debated on this day in labor history. The year was 2003. The head of the Transportation Security Administration, James Loy, made the case that collective bargaining would be an impediment to the war on terrorism. He signed an order that prohibited unionization by passenger and baggage screeners. The move was just one of several that eroded federal workers' rights in the name of national security in the aftermath of 9/11. The TSA was founded in the months after the 9/11 attacks by the Bush administration. Prior to the TSA, screening was done by private contractors run by the airlines. With the new organization, more than 45,000 screeners became part of the federal workforce. Massachusetts Senator Teddy Kennedy disagreed with the Bush administration's position that these workers could not join a union. He released a statement saying, "It's not Homeland Security, it's union busting." The TSA workers did not give up their fight to join a union. For the better part of a decade, they continued to organize and make their case. In 2011, the workers voted to become part of the American Federation of Government Employees. It was the largest union election by federal workers in United States history. There are limitations to the union, however, such as the screeners cannot go on strike, but the union can advocate for safe and fair workplace conditions. When the union was finally recognized, President of AFGE John Gage issued a statement. He declared, "Today marks the recognition of a fundamental human right for 40,000 patriotic federal employees who have been disenfranchised since the inception of the agency. Today, nearly 16,000 screeners have joined the union." Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
You know that frame, union job, better life. You know, as a young kid, I got that front and center because, like I said, in the past, you know, the neighbor got a union job at Ford, and immediately their lives got better. Food at the end of the month. Kids had better clothes. They got secondhand bikes. Eventually got a secondhand car. Eventually moved out of the projects altogether. But right in front of your very eyes, you saw their lives get better. Union job, better life, simple. And we're at a moment right now. This is an interesting time. That UPS contract that we talked about in the last segment, there's an opportunity. And there's an opportunity for the Teamsters and Sean O'Brien, the new president, to really recreate what a middle-class job, a prosperous middle-class job looks like. There's an opportunity to put, you know, Sean O'Brien's name up there next to Jimmy Hoffa, or even past Jimmy Hoffa. You know, when my grandparents were in the work world, you know, Jimmy Hoffa negotiated the National Master Freight Agreement, which created made truck driving jobs a solidly upper middle class job, professionalized the industry. And over the years, through bad policy deregulation, through horrible attacks on organized labor, what was once a very prosperous industry is now, just another job. O'Brien has the opportunity to put himself up there on the mantle with Walter Reuther and Hoffa and Murray and John L. Lewis and the rest of them, by delivering a contract that's going to ensure that every person makes a living wage. One of the things that UPS did during the pandemic that's disgraceful is they were paying their inside people, the people who load the package cars, the 4-hour casuals that come in, the armies of the 4-hour workers that they've got, the part-timers. They were paying them like $24 an hour to get them to come in during the pandemic. And then when the pandemic ended, they dropped them back to $14 an hour. And Friday you're working for $24. Monday they snatched $10 an hour from you. And it was one of those things where that's a reasonable, respectable wage. And what the unions, from what I'm told, is doing is, look, you can afford this. UPS had a couple $1 billion in stock buybacks. When you stop and think about the billions of dollars they spent on stock buybacks, what kind of raises, what kind of wealth could have gone to the working people who created that wealth? And O'Brien's a fighter. He's a guy, from what I'm told, he's a fighter. He's going to get in there and he's going to fight for it. And make the lives of those workers better. The argument's been for too long UPS has had it easy, and O'Brien, from what I'm told, the guy who's going to right the ship, going to fix the problems that have been there for so long. And this contract is how you do this, because the membership is there. The membership wants it. I have not seen this kind of energy around a leader in the years that I've been a member. Haven't. Maybe when James R. Hoffa took over, there was that energy at the beginning. This is an interesting moment. Going to be interesting to see what this summer brings to us. You got the UAW contract, you've got the freight companies' contracts are up, and the big UPS. There's an opportunity to revive the middle class, the working class of this country. And people like Sean O'Brien are the guys who are going to lead that. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com.
For decades, people have talked about the Brent Spence Bridge. But folks, We're finally going to get it done.
Biden promotes infrastructure repairs and upgrades as funding flows from new climate laws.
This may be one of the most challenging and impactful series of storms in the last 5 years.
West braces for another round of major storms. Plus, Republican dysfunction in U.S. House, a bad omen for climate policy.
All of those bad omens and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
House Republicans now are on the verge of becoming a total clown show if they're not careful.
Becoming? Oh, Sean Hannity, you be you. Happy New Year. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, a whole bunch of stuff happened while we were out over the holidays, and a whole bunch of stuff has happened since we've come back, and all you have to do is cover it all in less than 6 minutes.
Good luck to me.
Indeed.
As we go to air the spectacle of climate science denying far-right Republicans using their new U.S. House majority to monkey wrench the selection of the Speaker of the House is a harbinger of congressional chaos to come over the next 2 years.
Who could have guessed it?
House Republicans have pledged to expand fossil fuel extraction and slash clean energy funding, and they will also be in control of funding the government and approving emergency funding for extreme weather disasters.
Well, they're going to have a hard time causing too much trouble because the Democrats still control the White House and the Senate, right?
Yes, so that will make it harder for them to pass their anti-environment agenda.
Until they start including it in must-pass bills. But we'll cross that bridge if and when we get there.
A state of emergency in California amid a punishing series of major storms that are pummeling the drought-stricken western U.S., causing extreme flooding, mudslides, and power outages. But hydrology experts say the string of atmospheric rivers is still not enough to fill major reservoirs that have fallen to record lows or to pull California and other states out of historic drought. The dramatic swings from historically dry to extremely wet conditions are in line with climate scientists' predictions.
Those hydrologists are such gloomy gusses.
Meanwhile, while we were out, an Arctic blast brought extreme cold to most of the U.S. An historic blizzard killed more than 50 people, most of them in upstate New York, and triggered an airline industry meltdown. Beleaguered Jackson, Mississippi got yet another boil water notice as the deep freeze crippled the city's water supply again. The widespread power and water outages again exposed how the nation's infrastructure is not ready for climate change intensified extreme weather. A freakish heat wave in Europe over New Year's shattered temperature records in some areas by 20 to 30 degrees. At least 8 countries hit new all-time record temperatures for the month of January. Switzerland and Poland pushed an unthinkable 66 degrees Fahrenheit at 4 o'clock in the morning in winter.
66 degrees.
Yes.
In January.
In the morning, before dawn. However, the record warmth has slashed demand for natural gas heating. Here in the U.S., the U.S. Postal Service increased its purchase of all-electric delivery trucks and will electrify 75% of its fleet by 2026, creating one of the largest electric fleets in the nation.
Well, we're getting there.
And German luxury automaker Audi announced it is phasing out manufacturing of gasoline cars and converting all of its factories to produce EVs.
Really?
The Biden EPA enacted tougher pollution rules for trucks, vans, and buses for the first time in decades to cut down on toxic diesel air pollution. The U.S. Transportation Department allocated another $2 billion to repair critical interstate bridges. President Biden was in Kentucky on Wednesday to announce that a decrepit bridge, a vital commerce corridor in the Midwest, will finally get repaired thanks to federal infrastructure investment dollars now flowing to states from the bipartisan infrastructure law.
We can work together. We can get things done. We can move the nation forward.
Well, at least when Democrats have majorities in both houses of Congress, we'll see how it goes this year.
And finally, new incentives from Biden and the Democrats' landmark climate bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, which passed with 0 Republican votes. Those incentives are now in effect, offering homeowners and businesses numerous ways to access billions of dollars in funding, grants, and other mechanisms to go green and upgrade, boost energy efficiency, and save money on water and energy.
For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters and the Mastodons at Green News Report.
Are you tired of think tank-approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, yeah, I got to tell you, I saw Lauren Boebert, Gun Fetish Barbie. One of her big videos is how thrilled she was that the first act that she was able to perform was to do her little Annie Oakley, that they're tearing down the metal detectors. And I could care less about the metal detectors, but at least now if something bad happens in Congress, if someone does get a gun in, maybe shoot one of them, we now know who to blame. That's all she set herself up for. This kind of performative display, hey, look at me, because that's all she's about. At least now we know. We now know who to blame. That's simple. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on, hey, first day in Congress. How's it going? How's the Republican House Clown Show going? I've asked our good friend Joe Walsh to come talk with us. You may remember Joe was former Republican congressman, also former Republican presidential candidate, now host of the podcast White Flag with Joe Walsh. Joe, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, my friend, happy 2023. Damn good to be with you.
How are you? How are you? I haven't seen you in a while. How was your holiday?
You've gotten too big for me. You only have me on once every few months now. Life's changed. I'm good. Thank you.
I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad to hear you had a good holiday. So what do you think about the metal detectors? Were we pro-metal detectors, anti-metal? Where'd you find yourself?
I guess, like you, I could care less. But you make the good point. I'm a huge gun guy. Probably as big of a gun guy as Lauren Boebert is a gun gal. But you know what? I don't need to brag about it. I don't need to boast about it. I don't need to. I never needed to take campaign commercials carrying my latest firearm. It's these new people on the right, Rick. It's not what they believe. They've got to be like performance artists. It's crazy.
No, it's nuts. And look, I'm not anti-gun. I think we should have some saner regulations. I believe everybody's in favor of gun control. It's just a matter of where we draw the line. And I would draw the line a little bit saner. That's all.
You and I would draw the line in a different place, but you and I could sit down and have that conversation. You couldn't do that with Boebert.
And that was really apparent. I mean, let me ask.
But that's it, Rick. That's the important point, and we're going to see a hell of a lot more of that these next 2 years.
Yep.
These people are grifters. They're performance artists. I forgot where I was. It was either CNN or MSNBC last week. All the craziness last week, trying to come up with a speaker. It was the perfect storm. But you literally had, part of the problem was you had people like Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert and a handful of others who would literally blow up the House chamber if it would get them on Tucker Carlson. It's like that's their animating thing here. It's all about getting on Fox News, getting clicks. It's not about what they believe.
Yeah, my congressman, Scott Pardon Me Perry, was right there in the center of the whole mix.
Scott Perry was right there.
Yeah, I mean, and what's interesting is, they fought tooth and nail to make McCarthy the weakest speaker. So let me ask you this. How long does McCarthy make it? Do they eventually throw him out, maybe tomorrow? I mean, is there a countdown clock to how long it takes before they do something to oust him, now that it only takes one?
I don't know how long it'll last. I don't know if it'll last 2 years. I never really doubted that he'd ultimately get it
I didn't
because
either.
I know Kevin McCarthy, and I knew Kevin McCarthy would give away anything and everything to get it. And that's kind of sort of what he did.
Yeah. See, I wanted it for him. I wanted him to have it. And I've said this before. I want those 20 people to be the first thing he thinks about when he wakes up in the morning. When he gets his first cup of coffee and gets heartburn, I want those 20 people to be there throughout the day. I want those 20 people on his mind. When he goes to sleep at night, I want those 20 characters dancing and creating nightmares in his head while he sleeps, because he deserves that.
Well, I'm going to quibble with your premise a little bit. It's not 20. It's a hell of a lot more than 20. It almost didn't matter really which Republican became speaker.
Right.
Because no Republican speaker is going to be able to stop this agenda. And it is. Look, Rick, you know, it's not these 20.
Yeah.
The vast majority of Republicans in the House are election deniers. The vast majority of Republicans in the House are Make America Great Again Trumpists. McCarthy's going to have to handle a hell of a lot more than just 20 of them.
Yeah, the point you just made is, the reality is CBS just put out a poll, and that said, 35% of Republicans think that the party should still be loyal to Trump. Very, very important that they're loyal to Trump. And 30% said somewhat. So you got 65% of Republicans saying that they should be loyal to Trump still, even though Trump's power was kind of on the line through all this.
Hey, you know this. I served in the House, but you know this. The House perfectly reflects the bases of both parties. It's the people's house. You're closest to the people. We see it on the Democratic side and the Republican side.
That's how it was designed.
Exactly. The Republican Party base, the voters, are pretty fully radicalized. And you're seeing that. We're going to see that play out with these Republican representatives.
But here's the thing. I mean, the first club out of the bag today was this, what is it, small family farmer business? What was it the Family and Small Business Protection Act, which was evidently there's 87,000 new IRS agents we didn't know about. They've all been hired. They're all out there. I guess they're teaming up with MS-13 or who. If you listen to the rhetoric today, it's the end of humanity for working people. This was the first club out of the bag, though. We're going to defund the IRS.
Well, 2 points. And the Democrats did this when they took over the House. What you do is you throw red meat to your base, knowing that it'll never become a law. Well, in this case, Republicans know this will never become a law because the Democrats run the Senate and
right.
Biden would never sign it. So, and these House Republicans are going to do a lot of that. They're going to pass bills that have no hope of going anywhere. On this one, Rick, look, I'm torn on this one. I don't like our tax code. I think our tax code is idiotic and complicated. You and I may disagree about a lot on our tax code. I'm not a fan of the IRS, but if you're going to have an income tax, you need enforcement.
Wow.
I don't know what size that enforcement is, but if you're going to have an income tax with a complicated tax code, you need to make sure that people abide by that tax code. Now, Rick, if I had my be all end all, we'd have a flat tax or we'd have a national sales tax. We wouldn't tax income. We'd tax what you take out of the economy. I mean, I'm open to all of that. I would just get rid of our complicated tax code.
Yeah, I'm a supporter of going back to the good socialist tax code of Dwight David Eisenhower, our good socialist president.
Oh my God. Is there a way for me to get off of this show right now?
So what's your problem with Ike? What's your problem with Ike?
Here's my problem with anything. No individual human being should ever be taxed at an 80, 90% tax rate. Ever. I don't care how rich or poor you are.
See, this is where I go to the flip side of that. No individual should have $200, $300, $400, $500 billion. No one should have that kind of power.
Wait, but stop a minute. And I love you because you're so genuine in your beliefs. You don't believe that.
I do.
You believe in freedom. You believe as much of an idiot as Elon Musk is. Elon Musk can be as rich as he wants to be, right?
Within bounds. I mean, here's the reality.
Within bounds.
Here's the reality. When we've got children going to bed hungry, when we've got veterans being homeless, when we've got workers who are working for poverty wages, when we've got those scenarios going on, I'm sorry, I don't see an economy that we should have someone who's taking so much of it and putting it in their own pocket.
Well,
we've got a distribution problem.
Okay. So that maybe this is a nuance here. I think anybody in America should be free to be as rich as they can be. And I think you believe that. Maybe the difference is you would just support a system where we take more from an Elon Musk.
Yes, absolutely. Right? No, This is where I go back to the Eisenhower tax code. The reality is, and this goes back to the cave, Joe, the bigger your shoulders, the more water you carry back to the cave. We don't ask the scrawny little guy to carry the water back to the cave. We want the big Neanderthal carrying the water back to the cave.
Well, two things. The big Neanderthals in America generally are paying more in taxes than the scrawny guys. But I want to make sure about this, Rick. Like, you believe somebody is free to be a gazillionaire, right?
Sure. Yeah, but we should have a tax code that the bigger your shoulders, the more that you can afford, the more that you pay it. Much like the good socialist President Dwight Eisenhower. Every $2,000 incrementally the tax rate went up. So the better you did, the more you contributed to society because you're taking more from society.
Well, we should never, ever get to a point where the government's taking 70, 80, 90% from anybody. But Rick, if you want the wealthy to pay more, my friend, join me and get rid of this complicated tax code, get rid of all these freaking loopholes. How about a flat tax where every wealthy guy has to pay 25, 30% of their income, period? No deductions, no loopholes.
See, I would be in favor of a progressive flat tax.
Oh, what do you mean a progressive flat tax? Maybe 2 rates.
Should a person making minimum wage pay the same flat tax that Elon Musk would pay?
Because in reality, if Elon Musk makes $4 billion a year and the guy on minimum wage makes $50,000 a year, they're both being taxed at say 25%. So Elon Musk is throwing a hell of a lot more into the national coffers.
But the guy making $50,000 a year is paying a larger percentage of their income into this, and their standard of living goes down, whereas it doesn't even affect someone like Musk. So if you make it a graduated system that the bigger your shoulders, the more water you carry.
You and your bigger shoulders, Rick. I'd entertain an interesting debate.
Would you like a different analogy then?
Well, I've got a philosophical problem with progressivity in the tax rate.
Okay.
But I could sit down with you, Rick Smith, and consider a flat tax, including 2 to 3 to 4 different rates.
See, that's sane and rational. I think
I could sit down with a Rick Smith. You and I could hammer something out, maybe.
Sure, we could. And I believe that that's possible, or I used to. I look at what's going on in the House right now. That's not possible. It used to be, and I don't know who to blame. Is it talk radio? Is it cable news? Is it C-SPAN? Is it all of this stuff where the spotlight was put on these people where, hey, we've got to be actors and performers and characters and I don't know.
You know what? It's I got elected about 8, 9, 10 years ago. It was kind of before Twitter and just at the onset of Facebook. And I don't know. It's like these members of Congress now, Rick, it's like they're all free agents and all they're interested in is promoting themselves. Yep. Now, again, I don't want to both sides this. You see it on both sides, but like everything else, it's a hell of a lot more pronounced on the right.
Yeah, it's scary times that we're in right now. Now, here's the thing. I've been saying for a long time, I think the American people need to see what's coming. I think the Republican House clown show is something that we need to see. Do you think it's going to matter? Do you think people are going to pay attention? Or does this play into the frame of the Boeberts and the Gates and all them? That government is, the Scott, pardon me, Perrys, that government's corrupt and broken and can't do anything. I'm curious. Thought?
The best thing to happen to Democrats and Joe Biden is the Republicans winning the House.
Great.
And the best thing is Republicans winning the House by a slim majority, because they will spend now 2 years engaging in crap that the American people really don't have the stomach for or don't care about. Going after Hunter Biden's laptop, going after a so-called deep state, trying to put Dr. Fauci in jail. If Democrats are smart, Rick, they'll put out stuff every day, right? Talking to the American people, putting out potential legislation, trying to help the American people. Joe Biden and the Democrats should do that. Now, is it good for the country that the Republicans are in charge? I don't necessarily mind. I think you got to take the long view here. If the view is, if my opinion, Rick, is my former party is a direct threat to our democracy. So the goal should be Democrats have to take back the House in 24. So let Republicans do all their stupid crap.
And they got to hold on to the Senate and ultimately, hopefully, the White House. And I'm hoping Biden decides if he's running for re-election or not, because time is ticking if he's not. You listen to the Rick Smith Show here with Joe Walsh, former Illinois Republican congressman, presidential candidate, and host of White Flag with Joe Walsh. We'll get links out on social media. You can check out his podcast. I want to get your thoughts on the rules vote. I thought it would be a little bit more of a fight on the rules. I thought there'd be a couple Republicans to go, no, I'm not so thrilled with these rules. Were you surprised? Only one Republican voted against it?
Because what I'd heard all weekend is Republicans didn't want to go through at all what they went through last week. And look, the rules package is just generally kind of a set of guidelines and principles and some things you'd like to try to do. Most of the members can wrap their arms around most of that stuff, knowing, Rick, as you and I just talked about it, most of the stuff's never, ever going to happen. What they really want to get onto now is going after the Democrats and going after Fauci and going after Hunter Biden's laptop. That's what they want to do.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where this plays out.
And remember, I got to say this again, Rick. This is really important for your listeners to know. It ain't the 20. It's not 20. There are 222 Republicans in the House. About 160 or 70 of them are election deniers, or they blocked certification of the 2020 election. Marjorie Taylor Greene and Jim Jordan supported McCarthy. They're going to be with Lauren Boebert and Matt Gaetz on every single issue these next 2 years.
Yeah, that's going to be fun. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. And this is where, again, it comes back to radical self-interest, sitting in this chair every night, talking about just how crazy they are, and go look at the spectacle, look at the train wreck, and then the other part of me.
Radio for you.
What's that?
It's going to be good radio for you.
It is. It's good. There's that radical self-interest that this is good for me. It's good for me personally. But the sad reality, it's not good for my kids. It's not good for the future. It's not good because nothing's getting done. And
yes,
this plays into Republican hands of, we're not going to accomplish anything for the next 2 years. We're not making people's lives better. We're not doing the things that need to be done. We're not doing the people's work.
It is good. It is good for your kids, and it is good for your grandkids. Here's why, Rick. Again, we are in a fight to preserve this democracy. We have to take a long view. Yes, nothing will get done the next 2 years. Big deal. Big deal, because the Republicans are going to be what they're going to be. Democrats must let them be that way, because the goal is for Democrats to take back the House and keep the presidency in 24. Take the long view.
Yeah.
What's good for your kids and your grandkids is to get this Republican Party out of power.
No. See, my problem, Joe, is I didn't want them in power to begin with.
Well, I know that, but they're there. And
they are
by
there.
the way, they are there because the Democratic Party has some big old freaking problems as well.
Oh, we could spend hours on that, because I'm actually harder on the Democrats than I'm on the Republicans, because the Democrats should know better. It's that simple for me. So let me ask you this, because understand you were one of my chew toys back while you were in Congress.
I know.
You were somebody I went after pretty aggressively.
I know.
And now I sit here and look, we're friendly, and that's good. Did you ever think you would support a Democrat? I mean, seriously, this is the weird part for me, Joe. You were the extreme of the Republican Party back
in. Oh, yes, I was.
You were the extreme then. The party, wow, rocketed past crazy.
Rick, in 10 years, I've gone from musket grabbing Tea Party guy to a guy who left the Republican Party and is actively helping Democrats get elected. I'm telling you what, this has been a bizarro 10 years. No, but you get it. I'm still a proud Tea Party libertarian. I'm just not a jerk, and I believe in democracy. And this party doesn't.
And the thing is, I'm hoping, and the reason that I find you so compelling is that I'm hoping there are others out there who feel the same way, who look at someone like Donald Trump and go, he's a buffoon and all of that, and he's allowed all of this and encouraged all of this craziness. And now look, Trump didn't do this. He's a symptom of where the party was going for decades. I mean, for me, if I had to pick a moment, it would be Pat Buchanan back in 92. But we could probably even go further back than that. But it's go back to Nixon and the Southern strategy if you had to. But, the fact that they've gone so far off the rails, it's frightening to me.
Well, and again, what's really important here, they've gone off the democracy rails. Like, I was extreme, Rick, when I was in Congress. I was a jerk, but I was always a jerk fighting for policies I believed in. Yeah, I threatened to shut down the government and do all of that, but it was always policy-based. There's no policy aim to this Republican Party. It is a party that believes in authoritarianism, no longer believes in democracy. It's not even on the policy spectrum anymore. That's really frightening to me. And by the way, you asked where are all the other people like me? There are plenty of principled conservatives. The problem, Rick, is we don't have a home. We just don't have a home.
Yeah, because look, the reality is the right has built a massive megaphone. I mean, talk radio and cable news, and I know you
yes,
you had a talk radio show for years that was very popular.
Yes.
And you, to your credit, were honest to your values and ended up losing that, right?
Threw it all away, man. I threw it all away.
But you
no,
talk.
But Rick, I'm not a Democrat. I mean,
no, I know you're not.
For the record,
I'll vouch for you.
But imagine you, Rick. Imagine you're a good, genuine, principled progressive.
No, I'm a labor guy. The difference is I'm a labor guy.
By the way, I know you've told me this. Are you a registered Democrat?
In Pennsylvania, I have to be a registered Democrat or Republican because it's a closed primary state. I am a registered Democrat.
Imagine you left that party formally. You're not a Republican. I mean, you'd be kind of hanging out there in limbo. Yeah. That's what it feels like.
No, I vote on the labor issue because I think kitchen table economic issues are the most important issues. I think everything else, if we had a better economy that worked for working people, everything else would work itself out. And we could go through issue after issue where if we had more representation in the workplace and more prosperity in families' pockets, we'd be a much better society, but we're not there yet. I vote on those issues.
You promised me something. Sometime in the next 4 months, can I come on and you and I can debate and argue and fight about trickle-down economics? Because I still believe in trickle-down economics.
Oh, God.
To have that Don't you start with me, Rick Smith. Rick Smith.
Oh, God.
Rick Smith.
Joe, I've been trickled on enough. It's not the rivers of golden honey we were promised. It's salty, yes, and yellow, yes, and it's been all bad, Joe.
Don't you start. I'm going to mute you on your own show. Don't you dare start. We need to have a good civil debate about trickle-down economics. I'd love it.
We will do that. Absolutely. Maybe we'll do it in a podcast where we could the FCC language can come out.
That's a good point, Rick. That's a better place.
Because I fear maybe that's one of those things over a beer. Maybe that's where we go.
Yeah, I agree. That would be good.
Good stuff. But Joe, as always, I appreciate the time, man. Really great stuff.
Love you, brother. Keep it up, Rick Smith.
You as well, Joe Walsh. Make sure you check out the podcast, White Flag with Joe Walsh. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at that. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Can you imagine that? Now my mind is stuck on trickle-down economics. Thanks, Joe. A quick break right back after this. We're going to do that. We're absolutely going to do a podcast episode on trickle-down economics because, you know, I've been trickled on enough. Right back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Do national security concerns outweigh the right of workers to form a union? That question was being debated on this day in labor history. The year was 2003. The head of the Transportation Security Administration, James Loy, made the case that collective bargaining would be an impediment to the war on terrorism. He signed an order that prohibited unionization by passenger and baggage screeners. The move was just one of several that eroded federal workers' rights in the name of national security in the aftermath of 9/11. The TSA was founded in the months after the 9/11 attacks by the Bush administration. Prior to the TSA, screening was done by private contractors run by the airlines. With the new organization, more than 45,000 screeners became part of the federal workforce. Massachusetts Senator Teddy Kennedy disagreed with the Bush administration's position that these workers could not join a union. He released a statement saying, "It's not Homeland Security, it's union busting." The TSA workers did not give up their fight to join a union. For the better part of a decade, they continued to organize and make their case. In 2011, the workers voted to become part of the American Federation of Government Employees. It was the largest union election by federal workers in United States history. There are limitations to the union, however, such as the screeners cannot go on strike, but the union can advocate for safe and fair workplace conditions. When the union was finally recognized, President of AFGE John Gage issued a statement. He declared, "Today marks the recognition of a fundamental human right for 40,000 patriotic federal employees who have been disenfranchised since the inception of the agency. Today, nearly 16,000 screeners have joined the union." Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Question: how many legs does a dog have if you count the tail as a leg? Answer: 4. Calling the tail a leg doesn't make it one. Likewise, calling a small group of partisan lawyers a Supreme Court doesn't make it one. There's nothing supreme about the six-pack of far-right-wing political activists who are presently soiling our people's ideals of justice by proclaiming their own anti-democratic biases to be the law of the land. On issues of economic fairness, women's rights, racial justice, corporate supremacy, environmental protection, theocratic rule, and other fundamentals, these unelected black-robed extremists are imposing an illegitimate elitist agenda on America that the people do not want and ultimately will not tolerate. Indeed, the imperiousness of the 6 ruling judges has already caused the court's public approval rating to plummet to a mere 38%. An historic low that ranks down there with Trump and threatens to go as low as Congress. This has led to a flurry of protests by the court itself, attesting to their honesty and political impartiality. "The integrity of the judiciary is in my bones," pontificated Neil Gorsuch, who now stands accused of having lied to senators to win his lifetime appointment. "We're not a bunch of partisan hacks," wailed Amy Coney Barrett, a partisan extremist jammed into the court in a partisan ploy by Trump in the last few hours of his presidency. "Judges are not politicians," protested John Roberts, who became Chief Justice because he was a rabid political lawyer who pushed the Supreme Court in 2000 to reject the rights of voters and install George Bush as president. This is Jim Hightower saying, remember, in America, the people are supreme. We don't have to accept the rule by an illegitimate court. For reform, go to fixthecourt.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I've been waiting a couple of days. For this moment. You may remember last time we met, I was talking about the first entrant into the 2024 presidential race. And I remember, saying, look, we've got our first guy. He would completely undo our current foreign policy. We'd be much more muscular with China. We'd be much more muscular with Russia. Called Donald Trump one of, what was it, the dumbest person he had ever worked with. Said that unprovoked, attacking your neighbors is not something the U.S. and allies will tolerate. But announced that he was running for president on Good Morning Britain, which was kind of a weird thing. I don't know why you would go to Britain to announce you're running for president, but that's exactly what John Bolton did. And that's why I've asked my good friend Bob Ney to come share some thoughts, former Ohio congressman, political analyst, and big fan of John Bolton. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks. I just admire John so much.
So what do you think? What do you think Bolton's chances are? Big launch there on Good Morning Britain, 2.5-minute segment. What do you think his chances of getting the Republican nomination are?
I have more of a chance. I'd say you have more of a chance if they just hear you give a talk. You'll have more of a chance.
I was watching that and I'm going, really? Yeah, he's actually serious. And I'm going, I'm sure it's about selling books. But, if you're going to run for president, don't you think you'd want to, announce it? I don't know, where you're going to run?
Right. Well, he entered the race with the British media, but that fits in. Bolton in his mind, he's the international guy. When I met with Bolton face-to-face in my office at his request, I always give this quote. People say, what was it like? And I said, well, it reminded me of that Shakespearean quote, when I feel the twitching in my thumbs, something wicked this way comes. And that's how I felt about Bolton. As you know, I've been critical of Bolton forever. When Bolton was picked by Trump, to be the advisor for the NSA, and I went on Facebook and I just went crazy with it, and I had a ton of people on my Facebook page that said, Bob, I can't believe you're talking like this, and he's going to be this, he's going to be that. Well, by the time Bolton then got fired, they're coming on the page going, oh, that lousy Bolton, that traitor, John Bolton, if people listening, if they don't know his particulars, just do a wiki on Bolton. John Bolton has a history of being behind basically all the modern day wars, that are out there. And he also went with the Mujahideen cult when they were a official terrorist group by the United States government. They've been taken off the list now, but he was with them at that time. Anything, and he is completely 190% obsessed with Iran. Anything to do with Iran. Yeah. He wants to nuke Iran. Bolton is like one of the worst people that literally exists on the planet. But Rick, here's what this is about. People went to Trump, so, you got to have John Bolton. He's got to be in your cabinet. He's going to fix things. What Bolton did, he was the architect behind undoing the Iran nuclear deal. And so what you see going on in Iran, where the clerics were able to actually recapture the government to a ultra-conservative president, was as a result of that undoing the Obama nuclear deal. Could the Obama nuclear deal have been better, like with targeting missiles from Iran? Sure. Did the Iran nuclear deal stop and start to reverse the centrifuges? Absolutely. It gave us what we wanted with Iran in the long term. And that's what Bolton didn't like, and he undid the deal. All this disturbance right now, the clerics were able to say, you see what America did to us, we did the deal, we honored the deal, and this is what they did. This was all Bolton. So here's the nutshell on this. He's angry. He's angry at Trump. So he just wants to get into this race to simply sell books, make money, get more money as a think tank consultant. but he wants to irritate Trump. That's what he wants to do. He wants to make Trump's life miserable because he wants to take Trump's ultra-right base away from him, which technically he'll take, some of them.
Do you think he'll take any of them? I mean, especially with the Russia talk. I mean, because in his little spiel, he was actually talking about defending Ukraine, and not just with sending stuff, but actually getting involved. Same thing with Taiwan.
Well, but I'm saying Bolton will take some of Trump's support, but he's just in here to be the irritant to Trump. Now, I said this on your show in February because I said it on other shows that I've done too, and I'll say it again tonight. Trump will not be the nominee of the Republican Party. He won't be the nominee.
No, I don't think so either.
So Bolton, and I said it back then, and the day he announced I said it, but it doesn't matter. This is about any way that John Bolton can not only irritate Trump, but how Bolton can make money, be back in the limelight. He's official, but it makes sense that he did this overseas because he's in his mind, he's the international guy. He's he's got all these people overseas going, wow, you're saving the world, John. So I think that's what this is about.
Now, you brought up Iran, and I guess what was it?
Iran and money, and he'll now be able to. For the sad part of this, Rick, once he announces like this, he will have a platform where he'll be able to, to say things that will stir every single thing up.
Yay! Now you brought up Iran, and I guess what they've executed more people.
I'm sorry, what was that?
They've executed more people now?
Oh, yes, more people are executed now. Even the clerics have a certain fear. As crazy as they are, they have a certain fear. They have executed, but they have 19,000 people detained who technically are on the execution list. So, they've done a few, and obviously they're getting backlash for it. I'm shocked they haven't done more because in their mind they just everybody wants to talk about how tough the Shah was. These clerics are far, far worse.
Yeah, it's again, the globally things seem to be going crazier and crazier.
Right, it's tough over there for the people.
Speaking of crazy, I looked to the House. Were you surprised that the rules slipped right through?
Well, there were only two people beginning to, object to it in the sense they didn't say, we won't do it, but there were a couple of people. And at first, well, let's say this. If this were a secret vote, the rules package would have went down, but it's not. It's not a secret vote, so obviously, they passed. But I'm telling you, the people minus, I call them the members minus the 20, don't want this package. So this is just the beginning. This is going to be the most chaotic Congress in modern history. That is what is going to happen. And I watched one of the 20, I call them, of the ones that went against McCarthy, and I can't remember who it was, Rick, so I apologize, but on the broadcast they said something to the effect that we're running it now. We have the voice. We, the 20, have the voice. So are the other Republicans and any centrist Republicans, they're just going to sit back and let this all happen? Or are they eventually going to retaliate? And eventually something is going to happen where somebody is going to get so much heat back home for what the, quote, 20 are doing that they're going to be into an absolute food fight. And it's going to happen publicly. And it's going to happen on the floor.
And that's where, again, as I said a moment ago, sitting in this chair, going to give me the ability to use this as, well, it's going to be fun and entertaining, but it's not good. I don't think it's good for the country.
Oh, policy is going to be tough. And then, look, this is what Kevin McCarthy knows as Speaker. I know Kevin McCarthy, I've known him for years, and he's going to sit there in the Speaker's office. You're going to have the arm of the party there within the Republican conference, a particular amount of people. Well, first of all of them will go along with, okay, there's going to be an investigation of something. But then eventually a smaller portion of the Republican conference is going to thrive on these investigations. Jim Jordan, obviously. But a small amount then will thrive on them. And the investigations will become the red meat. They'll become the media focus. Meanwhile, Kevin McCarthy as Speaker is going to try to do public policy on different things, the budget, immigration, education, different items that they're going to try to do. But he's going to have a hard time because the investigatory arm is going to dominate. And when they become dissatisfied, the investigatory arm of the conference, when they become dissatisfied, they're going to vent towards the public policy arm that's trying to bring a mantra before the people so that in 2 years they can say, here's what we accomplished. Now, one good thing I will say, the one good thing is that they are bringing back the process of the budget.
Right.
There's going to be 12 bills, then they go to the Senate. Of course, in the Senate that'll dissolve, but that is a good thing. But how they're bringing that process back, by the way, it's like Pink Floyd's song "Eclipse of the Sun." Everything's in tune except it's eclipsed by the moon. So they're bringing this budget process back, but they're also going to flood it with so many amendments that it's probably going to become unworkable.
Yeah, going to be an interesting 2 years. And again, there's part of me that goes, the American people tune out, and that frame of it's all broken, they're all bad. And people just, my fear is people drop out and drop away. Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Yeah, it's all bad. It's all bad.
Oh yes, it's entertainment purposes in a sense. People are going to say, "Wow," but it's just like when McCarthy had his first vote, right? A lot of people said, "Oh, okay, yeah, he had the first vote," and then they'll go into a vote, and then when it kept going and going, it went from, "Wow, this is kind of really interesting," to, "Wow, this is really dysfunctional," and a potential fist fight on the floor and people screaming and doing things. So at first it'll be a look where people say, "Wow, look what this one said, look what this one did today," but after a while it's probably going to be just total dysfunction.
I'm waiting for that. But Bob, I appreciate the time as always. Good stuff, my friend.
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks so much. Our good friend Bob Ney, former Ohio Congressman, political analyst. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Quick break, right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. We often think of labor history as an urban movement happening on the shop floor. Yet farm workers have played an important and often overlooked role in labor history. Such was the case today. The year was 1939. More than 1,500 Missouri farmers and their families began a highway sit-in. The action was organized by the Southern Tenant Farmers Union, one of the few unions in the 1930s that accepted both white and black members. The Southern Tenant Farmers Union had been formed in response to New Deal policies. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's Agricultural Adjustment Administration was meant to aid the nation's farmers, who had been economically devastated due to the Great Depression. Yet little of this federal assistance found its way to the tenant farmers. Landowners kept most of the money for themselves. Displaced tenant farm families piled all of their possessions along the side of the highway in protest. These farm workers, their families, and all of their worldly possessions lined two major highways in the Missouri Delta. The tenant farmers braved frigid temperatures day after day. As a tactic, organizers published the actions with photos and newsreels. The newsreels showed startling images of the impoverished farmers and their meager possessions huddled in the freezing cold. Embarrassed by the images, Missouri state authorities moved on the demonstrators and forced them off the highway and into areas the protesters called concentration camps. The actions did catch the attention of President Roosevelt, who directed the Farm Securities Administration to provide assistance, including funding for housing for some of the displaced workers. As John Hancock's Great Depression-era tenant farmer, union advocate, singer-songwriter wrote, "Homeless, homeless we are, just as homeless can be. We don't get nothing for our labor, so homeless, homeless we are." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind. Email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Laura sent me an email here during the break talking about the Supreme Court case on Tuesday. Now, understand, as I said, I fear this has already been decided. I fear that with the Supreme Court that we have, the anti-worker court that we have, this is going to go through. That they're going to give corporate America the ability to sue workers and their unions anytime there's a strike. But Laura brings up something interesting. She says, quote, "Bottom line, the GOP and millionaires, billionaires, trillionaire look around and say, hey, where are our serfs? You cannot leave this job. You cannot leave this town. You cannot leave your skills. We trained you for another employer. You will cost us profits." She writes, "Serfdom is the goal. They don't want us. They don't want the 1950s. They want the Middle Ages. Before the cumulative effect of the plagues freed the remaining laborers to begin to demand better terms for their work." This is reality. She's not wrong, and it's all about control. The messaging that we're hearing is quite frightening because it's the same kind of chorus over and over again. We hear, oh, nobody wants to work anymore. It's the same chorus we've been hearing for decades. In fact, a guy on Twitter, I forget what his name was. He went back like into the newspapers into the 1800s and came up with this frame of nobody wants to work anymore. And it's the same kind of thing over and over and over again. And this is where, again, we as working people have to push back and push back vigorously. Let's go to the phone lines. Got Kurt on line 1. Kurt, how are we doing today?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good, Rick. I wanted to see if I'm out here, I'm helping the people out in California with this flooding. And I work for a nonprofit called Team Rubicon, USA.org. And basically it's a nonprofit, and it's ran by veterans. Yep. And what we're doing out here is we're helping with the animals that's stuck in the floods, and cutting trees down and helping people get evacuated. There's going to be a lot going on out here. And I normally don't ask for support for a lot of the organizations, but if someone can give and donate, it would be really appreciated. And we're going to have our hands full for it's going to go on for a while. They're not even done with the storms that are going to cause this flooding, and it's going to go on till next week. And but it's a really good organization, and we're going to need a lot of help, and it's ugly out here.
And where can people go to donate if they wanted to?
Yeah, and it's the website is www.teamrubiconusa.org, and it's a very good organization. We do disaster relief all across the country. We just finished off in Florida recently with the last hurricane. So
good stuff. We'll get links out on social media how people can check that out. Appreciate it, Kurt. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Rick.
Good stuff. We'll get links out, teamrubiconusa.org, if you want to check out the work that they're doing. Again, you look at this stuff and, the work that people like Kurt and others are doing in these disasters is just, it gives me hope that we can put down the red hats and the blue hats, and we can move forward together, that we can do this thing, this self-governance thing. Talking with Joe Walsh a minute ago, he said something that I've always believed in the past, that reasonable people can sit down and hammer out an agreement. Sadly, we're coming to an era where that's really not the reality much anymore. And it's not just our politics. I mean, you look at the nonsense we're going to see in the House for the next 2 years. The incentive for Republicans is to do nothing. The incentive is to get nothing done. The incentive is to say no. The incentive is to block any progress, because the wealthy are they're happy. They're happy with the deregulated environment. They're happy with weak labor laws. They're happy with poverty wage jobs for working people. They're happy with where things are. They're thrilled. So nothing getting done benefits the very well-to-do and big corporations. We know that. Which is why the Republicans are doing everything that they can do to make sure nothing gets accomplished. We don't invest in the future. We don't invest in healthcare. We don't invest in education. We don't help homeless veterans. We don't feed sick kids. We don't do any of that stuff. Oh, Rick, you're being hyperbolic. No, I'm not. They're literally talking about cutting things like Social Security and entitlement programs. They're literally talking about taking food out of the mouths of seniors and children. That is not being hyperbolic. That is just saying, look at what they're saying, look at what they want to do. But when I hear people like Kurt say, look, I'm out here and I'm doing this work because people need the help. And you go to this website, and I'm taking a look at it. The reality is there are people out there who are giving of themselves and helping. It gives me hope that in this country, that what we're seeing on the idiot box, what are in the inner tubes, on the Twitters and on social media is not who we are. The worst version of ourselves don't always win. That we can sit down and we can hammer out agreements, that we can work together we can all row in the same direction. But sadly, we're not. Same thing with, you look at the fact that we've got a Supreme Court that, on Tuesday is going to hear a case that is going to potentially have a massive chilling effect on the ability for workers to use the one tool that they have to make their lives better. And that is the ability to fold their arms and march their feet and withhold their labor. That's it. I mean, we've already neutered the right to strike by allowing scabs to come and cross picket lines, and we bust them in with police protection, and we've got scab nursing companies who go across the country for millions and millions of dollars. We've already weakened, and now they want you to pay. Working people should be infuriated. And I go back to 2015 and 2016 when the former guy was running, saying this is our future. The attacks on workers will continue. They will get bigger. They will come faster until eventually you will have no rights. Sadly, this is where we're heading. The question is, how long are you going to put up with that? How long will you tolerate what is right in front of us? How long? I know. But those Democrats are bad. I'm going to bite my nose off in spite of my face. What's good for the working class and what's good for workers and what's good for our communities and what's good for our economy. Never mind that because somebody's doing something I don't agree with. That it all be damned. How ludicrous is that? Want to hear your thoughts, though? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you find yours, you'll find ours.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.